There are moments in a reporter's life when the camera stops rolling, the notebook gets put away, and you find yourself face to face with something you never expected to witness. I've had my share of those moments in war zones, in the Oval Office, in places where history was being written in real time. But none quite like the night Elizabeth Taylor sat across from me in a dimly lit hospital corridor at 2 in the morning, mascara streaking down her famous face, and asked me a question that had nothing to do with movies or husbands or diamonds. "Do you believe in forgiveness, Walter?" she asked. "Real forgiveness? Not the kind you give someone else, but the kind you have to give yourself?" I didn't have an answer then. I'm not sure I have one now, all these years later. But what I learned that night in that unlikely place changed everything I thought I knew about Elizabeth Taylor. The world saw her as Hollywood royalty. 8 marriages, 2 Oscars, a jewelry collection that could ransom kingdoms. But the woman I met in that hospital corridor was someone entirely different, someone the cameras never captured, someone I suspect very few people ever really knew. This is that story, and it begins, oddly enough, with a phone call I almost didn't answer. It was the spring of 1983, and I was in the final years of my tenure as anchor of the CBS Evening News. The world was changing rapidly. Personal computers were becoming commonplace. MTV had revolutionized music, and a Hollywood actor named Ronald Reagan sat in the White House. I'd covered his presidency with the same careful scrutiny I'd given his predecessors, though I'll admit it felt strange interviewing a man I'd once seen in a Western. The newsroom didn't feel quite the same anymore. The old guard was slowly retiring, replaced by younger reporters who'd grown up with television, who'd never known a world without it. I was 66 years old, and while I had no intention of retiring just yet, I could feel the changing of the guard approaching. It was a Tuesday evening around 7 o'clock. I was reviewing scripts for the next day's broadcast when my assistant knocked on my office door. "There's a call for you," she said, her expression peculiar. She says it's personal. Says she met you years ago and that you'd remember. "Who is it?" She wouldn't give her name. "Just said to tell you it's about Rome." I had to think for a moment, flipping through the mental card catalog of memories. Then it came to me, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof had been filming there. I'd done a piece about the production, interviewed the cast. It had been a minor assignment, really. Not the kind of thing that usually lingered in memory. I took the call. "Mr. Cronkite?" The voice was unmistakable, even after all those years. Deeper than in the movies, with a slight rasph that spoke of too many cigarettes and too many late nights. "I don't know if you remember me. Elizabeth Taylor. We met briefly in Rome when I was filming." "Of course I remember, Miss Taylor. How could I forget?" There was a pause, and when she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller somehow, vulnerable. "I need to ask you a rather unusual favor, and I need you to not ask too many questions." "Not yet." "Can you meet me at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center? Tonight, if possible. I know it's asking a lot, but I need someone who isn't part of this world, someone who will just listen." Every journalistic instinct I had was screaming questions, but something in her voice, something raw and genuine, made me simply say yes. I told my wife I had to follow up on a lead, grabbed my coat, and drove to the hospital. I had no idea what I was walking into. I certainly never imagined it would lead to one of the most extraordinary conversations of my career, one I've never reported, never written about, never shared with another soul until now. Cedars-Sinai at night has a particular quality. Fluorescent lights that never quite banish the shadows, the constant hum of machinery keeping people alive, the shuffle of nurses' shoes on linoleum floors. It smells like antiseptic and coffee and something else, something indefinable that all hospitals share. The scent of mortality, perhaps, of human fragility. I found Elizabeth in a small waiting area on the 4th floor, tucked away from the main corridors. She was alone, which surprised me. No entourage, no assistants, no security. Just Elizabeth Taylor, wearing dark sunglasses despite the hour and a simple black sweater that looked like she'd grabbed it without thinking. She stood when she saw me, and even in that moment, even in that unflattering hospital light, she was striking. Not beautiful in the way the movie posters made her. This was different, more real. The famous violet eyes were puffy from crying. Her hair, usually so perfectly coiffed, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She looked exhausted. She looked human. "Thank you for coming," she said, removing the sunglasses. "No point in hiding now. I know this must seem strange. Is everything all right? Are you?" "I'm fine, physically anyway." She gestured to the chairs, and we sat. "It's a friend. He's upstairs. AIDS. They don't think he'll last the week." This was 1983, remember? The AIDS crisis was still relatively new, still shrouded in fear and misunderstanding. Most people wouldn't go near an AIDS patient. Even some doctors and nurses were refusing treatment. The stigma was enormous, the terror palpable. "I've been here every night for the past week," she continued. His family won't come. Can you imagine? Your own child dying and you won't even sit with him because you're afraid of what the neighbors might think, because you're ashamed. Her hands were shaking, not a tremor, actual shaking, fueled by anger and grief and exhaustion. Rock wanted to come too, she said, and I understood she meant Rock Hudson, though she didn't elaborate, but he couldn't. Well, that's not my story to tell. She pulled out a pack of cigarettes, lit one with an expensive lighter that caught the fluorescent light. The smoke curled up toward the ceiling, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. You're wondering why I called you, she finally said. A reporter, someone who could turn this into a headline. The thought had crossed my mind, because you're the only person I could think of who might understand something. She turned to look at me directly. You've reported on wars, Walter. You've seen people die. You've had to tell their stories while holding your own grief at bay. How do you do it? How do you care about everyone you meet but not let it destroy you? I didn't have a good answer. I still don't. So instead, I asked her a question. Why are you here? Really here, I mean. You could send money, make phone calls, use your influence from a distance. Why sit in this corridor night after night? She was quiet for a long moment, and I thought perhaps I'd overstepped. But then she began to talk, and once she started, it all came pouring out. Do you know what it's like to be decorative, Walter? To be looked at but not seen? I was 9 years old when they put me in front of a camera. 9, and from that moment on, I stopped being Elizabeth and became this thing. This beautiful thing that people wanted to own or possess or just look at. Every magazine cover, every movie role, every marriage, it was all about what I looked like. The violet eyes, the face, the figure. Never mind what I thought or felt or wanted. She stubbed out her cigarette, immediately lit another. My mother pushed me into it. The studio system swallowed me whole, and I was complicit. I won't pretend I wasn't. I liked the attention. I liked being wanted. I liked that when I walked into a room, everything stopped. But somewhere along the way, I forgot how to be a person instead of a persona. You seem pretty real to me right now, I offered. She smiled, but it was sad. That's because there are no cameras here, no publicists, no studio executives deciding which version of Elizabeth Taylor the public gets to see today. Just me, just a middle-aged woman sitting in a hospital watching her friend die. Tell me about him, I said. Your friend upstairs. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't cry. Not yet. His name is David. You wouldn't know him. He was a costume designer. Brilliant. Did some work on Cleopatra, actually, back in '60. The kind where you can call each other at 3 in the morning and just talk about nothing, about everything. She paused, gathering herself. David was one of the few people in my life who never wanted anything from me. He didn't care about my fame or my money or my connections. He just liked talking to me. About books, about art, about his partner, about my disasters of marriages. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. God knows I gave him plenty of material there. 8 times, I said, immediately regretting it. 8 times, she confirmed. You know what the papers call me? They call me a serial bride, like it's a joke, like falling in love and failing at it over and over is some kind of amusing quirk. But here's what they don't understand. I kept trying because I believed in it, in love, in the possibility of connection, in finding someone who could see past all of this. She gestured at herself, at her famous face, and just loved me, Elizabeth. Not the movie star, not the tabloid headline, just me. Did you ever find that? Pieces of it, moments. Richard understood, sometimes. Mike Todd did before the plane crash. But it's hard to love someone when the whole world is watching, when every fight becomes a headline, every tender moment becomes a photo op. After a while, you can't tell what's real and what's performance anymore. She stood up, walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Los Angeles sprawled out below us, a carpet of lights extending to the horizon. David's dying because he loves someone, she said quietly, because he was brave enough to love openly in a world that hated him for it, and now he's paying the price, alone in a hospital room, rejected by his own family. She turned back to me, and now the tears were falling freely. So I'm here because someone should be, because love, any kind of love, deserves to be witnessed, because David saw me when most people just looked at me, and the least I can do is sit with him while he goes. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Miss Taylor, he's asking for you. Elizabeth immediately wiped her eyes, straightened her posture. The transformation was instantaneous from vulnerable woman to composed presence. But then she paused. Would you come with me, she asked. He might like to meet someone new, someone to talk to about something other than this. I should have said no. I was a reporter, not a friend. This wasn't my story to be part of. But something in her eyes, a plea perhaps, or simply human need, made me nod. We walked down the corridor together, our footsteps echoing on the tile floor. The hospital at night is a lonely place. All whispered conversations and distant beeping of machines. We passed rooms where people slept or didn't sleep, where families kept vigil, where life hung in the balance. David's room was at the end of the hall. Elizabeth paused before opening the door, took a deep breath, and that's when I saw something remarkable. She composed herself, yes, but not into the movie star, into someone else, someone softer, someone real. The young man in the bed was impossibly thin, his skin pale against the white sheets, but his eyes were bright when he saw Elizabeth, and he smiled. "Liz," he said, his voice weak but warm, "you brought a friend." "David, this is Walter Cronkite. I thought you might enjoy some company that doesn't involve gossip about my latest disaster." But Walter Cronkite, David's eyes widened. "Well, if I'd known I was getting celebrity visitors, I'd have put on something more fashionable than this hospital gown." I liked him immediately. For the next hour, the three of us talked. Not about death or disease or fear. David wouldn't allow it. We talked about movies he'd worked on, about costume design, about the changing face of Hollywood. Elizabeth told stories about Richard Burton that had us all laughing. David shared memories of the studio system's golden age. At one point, David looked at Elizabeth with such tenderness. "You know what I'm going to miss most," he said, "our phone calls, 3 in the morning. You calling from London or Paris or wherever just to tell me about some absurd thing that happened. Promise me you'll keep having adventures. Promise me you won't let this make you afraid." Elizabeth took his hand. Her composure finally cracked. "I don't want to promise that," she whispered, "because keeping that promise means you're gone." "I'm already gone, sweetheart. This is just the paperwork." He said it so matter-of-factly, with such acceptance, that it took my breath away. "But you," he continued, squeezing her hand with what little strength he had, "you're going to live. You're going to take all this pain and all this anger and all this love you have, and you're going to do something with it, something that matters, something more than just being beautiful on a screen." "I don't know how," Elizabeth said, and in that moment she sounded like a lost child. "You'll figure it out. You always do." He looked at me then. "Walter Cronkite, trusted voice of America, you're my witness. Elizabeth Taylor is going to change the world. Mark my words." He was tired then. Elizabeth kissed his forehead, and we left him to rest. In the corridor, Elizabeth stood very still for a moment, her back against the wall, eyes closed. "He's right, you know," I said quietly. "You could do something. With your platform, your visibility, you could make people care about this crisis, make them see these patients as human beings, not headlines." She opened her eyes. Would anyone listen to Elizabeth Taylor, the woman who stopped traffic in Rome, who married the most famous actor in the world, whose jewelry makes headlines? Yes, they'd listen. Something shifted in her expression. I saw her thinking, calculating, planning. "It would destroy what's left of my reputation," she said. "The studios would hate it. Conservative America would hate it. I'd be associated with a disease that terrifies people, with a community that most of the country wants to pretend doesn't exist." "Yes," I agreed, "probably all of that." "Good," she said firmly. "Let them hate me. I've spent my whole life trying to be what everyone else wanted. Maybe it's time I did something that actually matters. Reputation be damned." And she did. Oh, she did. Elizabeth Taylor became one of the most important advocates for AIDS research and patient care. She co-founded the American Foundation for AIDS Research. She testified before Congress. She used every ounce of her fame and influence to fight a disease that was killing people while the government looked away. She lost movie roles. She lost friends who thought she was making a mistake. She was criticized, mocked, questioned, and she never wavered. But I didn't know any of that yet, standing in that hospital corridor in 1983. All I knew was that I was witnessing something extraordinary. The moment when a movie star decided to become something more. "Why did you really call me tonight?" I asked as we walked back to the waiting area. She considered the question carefully. "Because I needed someone to see this, to witness it. Not for a story, though I suppose you could write one if you wanted, but because I think we need witnesses to our better moments, just like we have witnesses to our worst ones. The world has seen every one of my marriages fail. Every pound I gained or lost, every fight with Richard caught on camera. But this moment of trying to be decent, of trying to help, I wanted someone to see that too, to remember that I tried." David died 4 days later. I attended his funeral, a small service that Elizabeth organized and paid for. His family didn't come. I never wrote about that night. Elizabeth asked me not to, and I honored that request. But I watched as she transformed herself from movie star to activist, from tabloid fixture to advocate. She became in many ways exactly what David had predicted, someone who changed the world. I interviewed her formally several times over the years that followed. We talked about her activism, about AIDS research, about the importance of compassion, but we never mentioned that night in the hospital corridor. That remained private, sacred even. She died in 2011, and the obituaries focused on her movies, her marriages, her jewelry. The famous violet eyes, the 8 weddings, the legendary beauty, all true, all part of her story, but they missed something essential. They missed the woman who sat in a hospital corridor at 2 in the morning, who held the hand of a dying friend when his own family wouldn't, who asked hard questions about forgiveness and purpose and what it means to truly matter. The world remembers Elizabeth Taylor as many things: a beauty icon, a serial bride, a jewelry collector, a Hollywood legend. All of those are accurate, but I remember her differently. I remember a woman who in the middle of her life decided that being famous wasn't enough, that being beautiful wasn't enough, that she wanted to be useful, to be good, to turn her pain and her privilege into something that might help others. Did she succeed? I think David would say yes. I think the millions of people whose lives were saved by AIDS research and treatment would say yes. I think anyone who ever felt alone or afraid or judged might say yes. As for that question she asked me, do you believe in forgiveness? Real forgiveness? I've thought about it many times over the years. I think what she was really asking was whether we can forgive ourselves for wasted time, for wrong turns, for years spent being what others wanted instead of who we truly were. I hope she found that forgiveness. I hope in those later years when she looked in the mirror, she saw past the famous face to the person underneath, the person who chose compassion over comfort, the person who used her spotlight to illuminate others' suffering, the person who proved that it's never too late to become who you were meant to be. The last time I saw Elizabeth Taylor in person, it was at a charity gala. She was in a wheelchair by then, her health failing, but she'd insisted on attending. As I approached to pay my respects, she looked up and smiled. That same smile that had launched 1,000 magazine covers. Still keeping secrets, Walter? She asked quietly, so only I could hear. Some secrets are worth keeping, I replied. Thank you, she said, for that night, for witnessing it, for remembering David. How could I forget? She squeezed my hand, and in that moment, I saw it again. Past the fame and the jewels and the legend, I saw the woman who'd sat in a hospital corridor and chosen to matter. That's the Elizabeth Taylor I carry with me. Not the one on movie posters or magazine covers, but the one who asked difficult questions and did difficult things and lived, finally, on her own terms. The world may remember her violet eyes. I remember her compassionate heart, and perhaps in the end, that's the most important story of all.